Welcome to In Your Defense, Galveston and Beyond.
Hello and welcome to Defense on the Coast with Mark Diaz, a passionate criminal defense attorney with over 25 years of experience defending the rights of Texans. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today's episode is Navigating Deferred Adjudication, how a criminal defense attorney can help. How's it going, Mark? Good to see you.
Kevin, how's it going? It's good to see you again.
Yeah, not bad. So, all right, it's a big word here. So what is deferred adjudication, and how does it work in the context of a DWI case in Texas?
Well, deferred adjudication is community supervision, right? It's a form of what everyone commonly refers to as probation. The difference between deferred adjudication and what we all refer to as probation is that deferred will not result in a conviction if you complete the term successfully, right? So let's say you get a 1-year deferred on your DWI. At the end of the case, at the end of your deferred, the charge is dismissed and you are not convicted. And that doesn't just apply to DWI. That's deferred. That's the definition of deferred, even if we're talking about felony cases. Mm-hmm. The one distinction that you do have to make for DWI, though, is that they're currently only available for misdemeanor DWIs. So by the time you get to felony, which means you've had at least it's your third or more DWI, deferred is not available as a resolution in that case. But on your first DWI, let's say misdemeanor, a deferred is available as an option, and you'll be on probation. But if you complete it, you will not be convicted. So that's good, obviously, for more than one reason. One, for people that don't have a criminal record, they don't have to worry about getting one. And then two, if it happens again in the future, your first one was deferred, so now you're still back only at your first one.
And what are the eligibility requirements for a defendant to qualify for deferred adjudication for a DWI charge?
First offender, no criminal history. Basically, it's for first offenders. It's
okay.
We also, I was going to add, so here locally, we also have a program called pretrial intervention, which is a little bit different and less stringent than a deferred. And that is for completely first-time offenders with no criminal history who have blown under a 0.15. But for deferred, it's essentially the same. They're not going to offer it to you if, let's say, a couple of years ago you had a felony drug case. They're not going to typically offer you deferred on your DWI. But it's definitely for people without a lot of history in the system.
And what is typically included in a deferred adjudication? Is it, as far as like what steps do you have to take to satisfy the requirements?
So typically, it's anywhere from 12 to 24 months. It's usually not 24. That's usually the max, but it's usually 12 to, let's say, 18 months of probation. You'll report once a month to a probation officer. You'll have to do community service hours. You may have a fine and court costs that you have to pay. You'll have a fee to pay to your supervising officer. You're subject to random drug tests, that type of stuff. It's, like I said, what everyone thinks of when they think of probation. It's just that at the end, you earn a dismissal.
Okay. And those random drug tests, do you have to quit drinking? Are you allowed to consume alcohol, during the time of of that 12 to 18 months or 12 to 24 months?
Yes, you're supposed to abstain from the use of alcohol. The reality of that situation is, obviously, if you're going to drink, you don't want to do it within 72 hours of going to see your probation officer because you're going to get tested, right? Yes, you could be revoked for drinking alcohol.
Wow. And how does this process, the deferred adjudication process, differ from a standard plea or conviction in a DWI case?
The big difference is when you take the plea and you're up at the bench with your attorney, the judge will ask you, how do you plea? And you will plead. And then the judge will say, I accept your plea of guilty or no contest, but I'm not going to find you guilty. I'm going to place you on 12 months deferred. And if you successfully complete it, the case will be dismissed and you will not get a conviction. Every other aspect of the plea is identical to if you were pleading to jail time or straight probation.
Okay. Are there other advantages to deferred adjudication besides it not appearing on your record?
Isn't that the point, right?
I mean, like, do you get your license taken away in one situation and not in the other? Are there other things? Are there other leniencies involved in it compared to other options?
Yes. A jail time plea, basically on a conviction, your license is going to get suspended. Now, that gets into a lot of different situations. If you hired us in time that we were able to represent you on the initial suspension from getting arrested, let's say you did get suspended, then we ask the court to give you credit for that time that you were suspended, right? This is the reality of it. Sometimes we negotiate a probation we negotiate a deferred for a client on a DWI if we think we can't win, and then we want them to obtain the dismissal in the end, right? If we can't go that route, but we're stuck, then what we want to negotiate for is a time served plea. Meaning if you spent one night in jail, we want to just take that conviction and pay a fine. Now, when we do that, that does invoke a license suspension. But then we can get you an occupational license so that you can drive for purposes of work, school, whatever you need to do. But short of that, we really never plead anyone to straight probation. If we get straight probation, it's because we've gone to a trial, lost, and now we're asking the jury not to put the person in jail, but to give them probation. Now, that's my office, right? I can't speak for everyone. But if the state is not offering me a deferred, I have no incentive to plead to straight probation because I can get it from a jury. A first-time DWI offender, juries here locally are not going to send that person to jail, right? They're going to put them on probation. But we don't ever really take a probation plea on a DWI because deferred is available. So if they're not going to give it to me for whatever reason, we're going to end up in trial. And if I lose, I'll get it from the jury. And if I win, I get nothing.
Yeah. So let's say someone breaks the terms of their deferred adjudication. Let's say 6 months in, they go and they do a drug test and they test positive for something they're not supposed to, or they get in trouble or whatever. What happens to their situation then?
So I meant to tell you this earlier, but I got sidetracked. The good thing about deferred is that you will not get a conviction if you successfully complete it. The bad thing about a deferred is if you violate, the entire range of punishment is open to the court, meaning it's a first-time DWI, Class B misdemeanor. That means up to 180 days in jail and a $2,000 fine. If it's a Class A, that means up to a year in jail and a $4,000 fine, and then up in felonies. But that wouldn't apply to a DWI. So you can encounter situations like we used to have a judge locally that if you came back on a deferred in his court, he would not accept less than 90 days in jail.
Oh, wow. That's harsh.
Yeah, because when you come back on a deferred, you don't have a right to a jury trial. The only thing you have a right to is a hearing in front of that judge to determine what your punishment is. Well, first to determine whether you violated, and if you did, then what your punishment would be. But that would be a time when, if we can, we would negotiate for then a straight probation, which is a conviction, if we're talking about any real jail time.
So are there situations then where someone might not want to go for deferred adjudication if it's possible, just because the punishment for failing, if you will, is so strong?
It's all going to depend on the person, right? Mm-hmm. What they do for a living. You got to understand that there's people, right, that a week in jail would cause them financial ruin, right? Because they live paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
So that person is going to be more concerned about it and more likely to do it deferred. There's also the guy that doesn't care. He's self-employed. He's like, I don't want to do all that. Just give me time served, pay a fine, and I'll get an occupational license. So really, that comes down to each individual's decision.
Yeah, that's interesting because I could see that being something that someone might be like, yeah, I don't. It's fine. I'll just take that. But then again, that goes on your criminal record. You have a criminal record though.
But that's what I'm saying. There's people out there that they're self-employed. They don't care.
Yeah.
They don't care about the record. Their boss ain't going to fire them. And then you've got the opposite. You've got the guys that go, dude, I drive a company truck. I can't get that. My job will fire me. Right. Mm-hmm. So you get both ends of the spectrum.
So if someone successfully completes is it usually 12 months of the deferred adjudication? You successfully complete it, and then afterwards, that's it. It's like nothing happened. You're good?
Yes.
That's a pretty good deal. If you can do it, if you can get through the year.
It is. It is. You have to understand that DWIs are usually a different type of client, and they did not start their day that day with the intention of getting a DWI, right? Not like the guy who planned to go do a robbery, or the guy who planned to go buy drugs. And so it's a person who made a mistake. They just want to do what they can to get through it and get it behind them. At the same time, I've got guys who have been to prison who get a DWI, and those are always the guys that are like, I ain't doing probation. How much do I got to pay?
One of those people that if someone has a record, you said that they don't have the option typically of deferred adjudication, correct?
It depends upon a lot. The prior, when was it, what was it, depends on, there's a lot of factors that come into play. And part of that is also going to be the prosecutor that you're dealing with.
So if someone comes to you, hires you as their defense attorney after a DWI, do you try for deferred adjudication every time if they want it, or even if they have a record, or do you sometimes go, trust me, you ain't getting it?
No. But you got to understand, the first thing I try to do is see, can I beat the case? Is there some defect? Did they do this wrong? Did they do that wrong? So deferred is going to be like, I've determined I can't win, right? So no, I don't ever start the case going, I just want to get deferred on this, right? I want to win. And then if I can't, what's the best resolution for my client? That's where I would end up at a deferred. I would never start the case going, well, hopefully I can get a deferred.
Okay, got it. So first you start to see if there's anything wrong with the case where you can get it thrown out or win a trial. And then if you can't, then you start picking down what the next options are.
Right. Because we got to start at the stop. Was the stop legal? Then what cause did the officer have to then suspect that there was alcohol involved? And so we have to go through all that. And then if there's blood or breath, which breath is not as common these days, but did they mess up on their warrant for the blood draw? Did the client consent to the blood draw? Like, there's so much involved before we even get into what does the video show? What were the driving facts? Like, a DWI investigation is very involved.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us on Defense on the Coast with Texas criminal defense attorney Mark Diaz. To connect with Mark, you can visit texascriminaljustice.com, and please like and subscribe to our channel. Mark, it's always good to see you. Thanks for walking us through this topic of deferred adjudication. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.